Thanks for joining us on Time for Hope, a faith-based mental health program. I'm Dr. Freda Cruz, your host, and for the third week, I am being joined by psychotherapist, counselor, and seminary professor, Dr. Richard Winter, as we close out our discussion of his book related to depression, a mental health disorder known common to all races and cultures across the world. And Dr. Winter has been careful to paint the dark side of this mental health disorder, but also has offered hope of recovery and living life in the light instead of being kept captive by this dark intruder into our lives. He relates that even in the shadow of the valley of death, God can bring healing and deliverance. Stay with us as we close out our discussion with the hope that awaits us here and in eternity with God. And Dr. Winter, we do appreciate your coming to Time for Hope and staying as long as you have stayed. You haven't been sitting there for 3 weeks, of course. I'm sure our viewers know that. But we did prevail upon you to do the 3 shows, and you've missed your first flight, and you've got to go home later than you had planned.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's greatly appreciated. May the Lord bless you, your ministry, your teaching, your books, and so forth. As we close out, we've touched on the whole problem of suffering and God allowing it in our lives. But you actually lay out in your book 5 reasons why we suffer. And I think we need to get it out, and my viewers know that I put it out quite often. God would not allow us to suffer if he didn't have good reasons. And when I have taught across the nation on a theology of suffering, I always encourage my students to change the question of why into what. Not why is God doing this to me, but what is God attempting to teach me? What am I to learn? And I've done that with my clients, actually, in counseling. I say, look, what is, it has happened. Now what are you going to do with it? And you know what I encourage? Drain it dry. Get everything out of it. It's like turning on the pain and the suffering and getting everything out of it that you can get. And you can do this with depression. Actually, we started out with that whole idea of trouble being turning into a door of hope. So I want to end with that also.
Yeah, it's so important. And I talk often about what we call a breakdown, hopefully becoming a breakthrough to a new perspective on life. And certainly when I went through my dark times, the Lord taught me deep things about my own heart and some of the idolatries of my own heart that I needed to let go of. But I think when you talk about the different reasons for suffering, it's also, we've been talking a lot about the details of depression and antidepressants, and it's so important to get the big picture of the fact that God created a world that was perfect, but because of sin, because of Adam and Eve's disobedience, all sorts of cataclysmic effects came from that. And the brokenness of the relationship with God, the brokenness of the relationship between Adam and Eve and men and women and people on the earth, and disease and the vulnerability to biochemical disorders of the brain, all of this results from the fall. So there are things that happen to us that are no fault of our own, that one day God is going to heal completely. And we may not experience complete healing this side of glory. And some things happen to us because of other people's sins. You know, maybe the sins of our parents or our grandparents with abuse or cruelty or whatever may have happened. Some things happen through our own sin. And some things, of course, happen because of the devil's work in our life. And the existence of dark forces, demonic forces, is a reality that the Bible doesn't give us great detail about, but all the way through gives us hints that you need to be watching out because there's warfare, and you are caught up in warfare. And I think when we are depressed, and especially when we find ourselves thinking self-destructive thoughts, the devil is right there urging us on, and we need to resist him. So those are some of and then sometimes God allows these things, as you said, to discipline us and to help us to see new things.
When we think about the evil forces, I think we need to encourage our viewers, and I'm sure you encourage students and so forth, that we don't listen to the lies of the devil. There is a real devil, and of course he can be referred to as the devil, the accuser of the brethren, or the scriptures refer to him as the accuser of the saints, so to speak, Satan. And when we're depressed, it's so easy to get obsessed and allow these obsessive thoughts to come in. So when we talk about talk therapy and we talk about counseling, let's talk. One of the most popular therapies today and was discovered by two outstanding psychologists that have used the whole idea of a new perspective, that we can win over depression by the way we think. And again, our thinking, as we've already brought out, changes the brain.
Right.
So if we're going to go out of this darkness, leave this dark world that you've written about, and go into the light, we've got to change our thinking. Cognitive behavioral therapy is generally very effective.
Yes, what we call CBT, sometimes it's abbreviated to, is very effective in renewing the mind, changing our perspective.
That's very scriptural and biblical, and you talk about that in your book also.
It's recognizing the lies that we believe, the distorted thinking that we have, and very often that comes from early childhood relationships where we have learned perhaps, for example, that we're only accepted if we get straight A's, the classic perfectionist sort of thinking. But I think it's not just thinking, it's also that our emotions need to be renewed as well.
But don't you
and that's
think
part
we
of the mind.
Emote according to the way we think? Or
Well,
I
think the two, it goes both ways, I think. And I think as we learn to deal with emotions of sadness and learning to deal with grief, and learning to deal with anxiety, and with anger and shame.
A lot of people live in shame. Right. Shame of what they've done. Exactly. Shame of the family they come from. Shame of all kinds of things can bring about shame, can't it?
So a lot of the talk therapy that we do involves helping people to feel their emotions, but also to think about what they're feeling and why they're feeling those things, and to be able to express, to know when shame is good shame, healthy shame, because I think there is some healthy shame, and when it is unhealthy and corrosive shame, and when anxiety is normal and healthy and good, and when it's unhealthy. So that a lot of psychotherapy and counseling is learning how to deal with strong emotions that many people have not learned to deal well with, and then they come out in depression or in phobias or in panic attacks. So it's dealing with both our thinking and our feeling, I think. And part of counseling is also giving people an experience of a relationship which they may never have had. They may have always grown up, say, with a very critical parent, and they get in a relationship with a therapist or a pastor or a counselor who can help them to think about their inner world and not feel condemned all the time, not feel they're never living up to someone's expectations, and point them to a God who does love them unconditionally, who does offer them grace and accept them just as they are, with all their brokenness and sinfulness, and wants to heal them and bring them into the light and the hope of the truth.
Many people perceive God as they perceive their parents. And when they can be when God can be redefined, as it were, by His Word and by a Christian counselor, and say, well, you know, he's not that kind of parent. He is a parent, but he's a different kind of parent. He's loving. He's kind. Jesus even said that when He said, exactly. Come unto me, all you that are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And my yoke is easy, my burden is light. He says, for I am gentle. And many people have a wrong concept of God. They don't think of Him as gentle, loving, forgiving, and so forth. That within itself, that truth can help deliver them from a world of darkness into a world of light.
And I think not only the truth, in other words, understanding it, but also the experience of being in a relationship. And nowadays, therapists often talk about a corrective emotional experience of being in a new relationship that shows you, that demonstrates something of the character of God to you, that God delights in you. And I teach my students there's a sense in which we need to delight in everyone that we meet and bring out and recognize the dignity in them, as well as exposing the depravity and the brokenness and the sinfulness. But to recognize the beauty of the image of God in them, and to help them to live out in that.
Yes, so that they get a better self-esteem. A low self-esteem can lead to depression.
That's a very common thing.
Because, as I mentioned from reading one of the prayer requests, attempting to please everybody. That says, I don't feel like I'm measuring up unless I'm pleasing. Right. And that can wear one out and eventually could put them into a state, because they can't please everybody, and when they can't, they could become very depressed about it. So they don't have to. As a child of God, they don't have to please everybody.
That's very liberating, freeing,
to do that. So, we could preach a little bit here, couldn't we? And then when we think of recovery from depression, actually, I like the word transformation. As we move out of the darkness into the light, we will not be the same. I have always taught when we enter a crisis, we're never the same when we come out of a crisis as we were when we go into a crisis. And our goal should be to be transformed by that crisis. Let the trouble become a door of hope. That we enter a new normal, a new world. I think of Psalm 23, green pastures where the Lord leads us. Well, green pastures are open and free and so forth, and then the still waters and so forth. So when we think of leaving, of recovery, let's also think in terms of being transformed in the process. And they're telling me it's time for a break. Let's pick up right there when we come back with recovery and transformation. How about that? And we will be right back. Everyone has the blues from time to time. Weather changes, food, illness, loneliness, disappointment, and everyday stress can cause us to feel sad for a few hours and even a few days. This comes with our humanness. But when the sadness begins to deepen and last several weeks without relief, when the future begins to look bleak, when pleasure in activities once enjoyed is gone, and a sense of hopelessness and even despair begins to take control of our thoughts, it is time to look for help. In reality, help should be sought before depression reaches this point, but all too often the symptoms are ignored, denied, and sometimes converted into physiological symptoms or illnesses. A serious or clinical depression can have a gradual or sudden onset. Depression can be traced directly to biochemical deficiencies and activities within the brain, or indirectly to prolonged stress, unresolved relationship conflict, unrelenting emotional abuse, childhood abuse, significant loss and grief, physical conditions or illness, spiritual deficiencies, and other causes. Whatever the cause, its primary symptom is hopelessness. Depression clouds our perspective, distorts our thinking, and convinces us that we are to be pitied beyond all others. The patients I have treated appear to be in a long, narrow, and dark tunnel with no light shining through. Through the centuries, men and women have suffered from this mysterious and frequently immobilizing disorder, and the remedies and interventions were few and usually ineffective before the discovery of the many successful medications and other medical treatments available today. But these alone are not a cure-all for this painful malady. Successful treatment should include the following: a competent physician to diagnose and prescribe needed and appropriate medication for each individual patient, and sometimes this requires a process of trial and error. A trained and empathic counselor who will listen attentively as you describe your feelings of hopelessness and helplessness and focus on helping you replace your negative thought patterns with the belief there is hope of recovery, which in turn can set into motion positive emotional changes. A nutritious diet, exercise approved by your physician, an understanding support group, spiritual help and direction. A depressed psalmist groaned, "Why are you downcast, O my soul?" And then exhorted fellow depressed mortals to put your hope in God. We always appreciate your joining us on Time for Hope. We're talking with Dr. Richard Winter about his book, When Life Goes Dark. And we want to talk about recovery and transformation. And you said some good things off camera that I hope we can get going, that you will remember. But recovery, when we think of grief, I know Alan Wolfeld, I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He's one of our gurus on grief. He does a great job of that we have to adjust to a new normal.
Yeah.
We move from an old normal to a new normal when we're going through the loss of a significant person in our lives. The same is going to be true going out of the darkness that we've been talking about of depression into light, into being a transformed person, allowing this trouble, this suffering, to be a door of hope. And I like to think in terms of moving into those green pastures that our great shepherd leads us by. When you think of green pastures, I was reared in the country, so I kind of know about green pastures and the openness and the beauty of those green pastures and the freedom and so forth. So there has to be an adjustment to a new reality to get rid of our myths and find out what is truth and what is true.
And obviously there are myths in terms of the things we've believed about our past or about who we are as people or how God sees us. There are also myths, I think, that are unhelpful in the Christian world that promise that if you're a good Christian that you won't suffer much and you won't have much trouble. Of course that's not true. And so people may have to give up their hope of having heaven now. You know, the green pastures you describe are something that are both partially true now, but also in the future. And a lot of what people need to come to terms with, I think, in life is that life is tough. And I say to my students often that when you're counseling people who have been through a lot of hard things in life, maybe in their childhood and maybe in things that have happened to them in their marriages, you have to learn to groan well, just as Paul talks in Romans about groaning with the whole creation as we wait for the day when our full redemption will come.
And as he did with his thorn in the flesh.
As he did too, that's right. We groan with people because life is tough. And I think that's a new perspective. As people come through depression, often they have a more realistic view of suffering and the way God works in it, and that life is not always going to be easy.
That there is a new reality,
yes,
and also a new normal, and sometimes it requires, we've already talked about therapy, which we highly recommend with a good therapist, talk therapy, but then there is self-talk, which Dr. David Stoop came out with many years ago. In changing our perspective, it can require that we do a lot of self-talk, telling ourselves the new reality rather than allowing the myths to continue.
And I think that's what you learn in counseling, that that you learn ways of talking to yourself so that you're not dependent on someone else, on a counselor all the time. That when you wake up in the morning and you feel really low or you feel really angry, then you begin to ask yourself, why am I so angry? Where are my thoughts taking me? And you learn how to deal with shame and how to deal with guilt and anxiety and fear.
Anger, which I think you had a whole chapter in your book on anger and
anger
depression.
and forgiveness.
Yes.
And that's something we haven't touched on.
Yes.
Lack of forgiveness is very often
a cause of
deep
depression,
cause
a
of
root
depression.
of depression, isn't it? A lack of forgiveness, and anger and unforgiveness go together. I always see them as going hand and glove together. So that might be something that the therapist and the person
very often it's something that has to be dealt with.
Has to be dealt with. So when we think of recovery, some of the things that you recommend, we've said it. Exercise. Exercise is good for most anything. Anything. So we
and fish oil is good for everything.
Yeah, really. And the breathing and relaxation.
Yes, that's good, especially for people who are more anxious. They can learn simple techniques of that.
So they will have to find someone to lead them in that
and there are places online that I recommend in my book.
Yes, okay.
Where they can find that.
Great. Then how God is using this to shape their lives.
Yes.
Embracing our pain, I've taught that. And then church involvement, music can be a way of finding relaxation and be used in our relaxation. I want to read a whole paragraph in going out on this subject that you have in your book, and I think it sums it up really well. As we daily, hourly, minute by minute affirm God's truth about ourselves and our situations, our emotions will become truly sensitive and appropriate and less the dominating and controlling factors in our lives. Mind and emotions will work together in harmony rather than at odds with each other, moving toward full integration, and we've talked about it, brain, body, mind, and heart. Our confidence is in the fact that when we are with Him, when we go to be with the Lord, face to face, this integration and healing will be, I'm going to cry, I think, will be complete. Will be complete. That's Praise your God. Hope. That's my hope. Amen. You've done a wonderful job of putting that and making sure that the secularists and their knowledge can be used of God. All truth comes from God, and you take that up in your book in such a great way. And the Bible, then of course the biblical wisdom of the scriptures and the promises of God, and there's not really, they don't have to work against each other. They can work together. Right. All of it, the counseling, the scriptures, the secularists and their knowledge, and people like you that are pulling it together in a great book like you have.
Well, I hope it can be helpful for many people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been very good to be with you.
And
thank you.
Thank you for bearing with us, as I've already noted, and I do have a prayer request to share with you as we go out. And if you haven't shared your prayer request with us, we always encourage you to do so, and we take up each and every one of them here at Time for Hope. Dear Dr. Freda, I am in my 50s and have battled fibromyalgia for years. I am now dependent on pain medications which cause depression, sleeplessness, and other health issues. Please pray for me, which we have already done and are very happy to share your problems with you. And we hope that God is already intervening. He promises to hear our prayers. And then finally, dear Dr. Freda, God bless you. It is so good to see your program, Time for Hope. Knowing Jesus, and I like this, is the best thing in my life, and I agree with that. I walk around the house praying and thanking Him for all He has done for me. And you know, I do that also. This is an encouraging note, and thank you for it. And make sure that you join us again next week on Time for Hope. We won't be dealing with depression next week.
A free fact sheet that contains additional information about today's topic is available upon request from our ministry. You can also receive a copy of today's resource for $12 plus $3 shipping and handling. To receive the free fact sheet or our guest's book or both, you may call us at 1-800-669-9133. Write us at Post Office Box 2169, Spartanburg, South Carolina 29304. Or visit our website at timeforhope.org. When you call or write, please prayerfully consider a donation to our ministry. Our ministry's mission is to offer hope to discouraged and hurting people. As we continue to give out messages of hope, you can become a member of our team by sending us a financial gift of any amount. When you send your gift to support Time for Hope, you are joining us in offering hope to many viewers who might believe there is no hope for their situation. And you're also enabling us to inform and inspire some viewers to expand our mission as they learn and in turn can minister more effectively to hurting people around them. To see this program again online, go to our website or find us on YouTube. Join us next week on Time for Hope as Dr. Cruz discusses another insightful topic. Until next time, have a great week, and remember, it is time for hope.